Ferrari just found a way to gain almost a second per lap without adding a single horsepower. That should not be possible, because right now they are down by around 25 horsepower to Mercedes, a gap big enough to lose every straight, every battle, every race. But here is the part that changes everything. Ferrari is not trying to be more powerful. They are trying to be smarter. A secret energy system that predicts the entire lap, deciding exactly when the car will be fast and when it will hold back. Not reacting, controlling. And if this works, they do not just fix the problem. They turn their biggest weakness into something Mercedes cannot copy in time. Because this is not just an upgrade. It is a completely different way of racing. Stay with me, because what Ferrari is about to unleash could flip the entire grid overnight. Subscribe now, because this changes everything. At first, nobody noticed it, because nothing looked different. The cars still sounded the same. The lap times looked similar. The gap's still there. Ferrari was still losing on the straights, still falling back after a few laps, still looking like the second best team. But underneath that, something had already changed. Not visible, not obvious, but fundamental. Because Ferrari was no longer driving the race the same way. They were starting to control it. And it begins with one simple shift. When the power is used. Because before, the system was reactive. Battery high deploy, battery low harvest. Simple, predictable. And that predictability was the problem. Because rivals knew exactly when Ferrari would be vulnerable. Exactly when the power would drop. Exactly when to attack. But now, that pattern is gone. Replaced by something far more complex. A system that does not wait for the battery to drop. It anticipates it. It calculates the entire lap in advance, corner by corner, straight by straight, deciding where energy must be saved, so it can be unleashed at the exact moment it matters most. And that changes everything. Because now, Ferrari is no longer fast everywhere. They are fast exactly where they need to be, and nowhere else, which sounds like a limitation, until you realize what it actually does. It concentrates performance, instead of spreading it, and that is where the advantage appears. Because imagine this, two cars on a straight. One has more power overall. The other has saved everything for that exact moment, for those few seconds. And suddenly, the gap disappears. Not because the engine is stronger, but because the timing is perfect. And that is something data alone cannot fully predict. But Ferrari is trying to, using temperature, grip evolution, battery cycles, even race position, all feeding into a system that is constantly recalculating the best possible energy strategy, not lap by lap, corner by corner. And that creates something new, a car that behaves differently every lap, but always for a reason, always with intent. But here is where the story takes a deeper turn, because this is not just about gaining speed, it is about removing weakness. Because the biggest problem Ferrari had was not the lack of power itself, it was when they lost it, at the worst moments, at the end of straights, during overtakes, while defending, and that made them predictable. Easy to read, easy to beat, but now, those moments are being erased, smoothed out, replaced with controlled deployment. No sudden drops, no visible hesitation, just a consistent flow of performance. And that alone changes how rivals interact with them. Because now, you cannot wait for Ferrari to slow down. You do not know when it will happen, or if it will happen at all. And that uncertainty is powerful. But this is where the risk begins. Because this system depends on precision, extreme precision. If the prediction is wrong, even slightly, energy runs out too early, or is saved too long, and the car becomes vulnerable again. But in a different way, less predictable, more chaotic. And that is dangerous. Because now, the driver has to trust something he cannot fully feel. He cannot see the algorithm. He cannot see the calculations. He can only feel the result, through the throttle, through the response of the car. And that is where drivers like Hamilton and Leclerc become critical. Because they are not just executing, they are validating. Every lap, every corner, confirming whether the system is working, or drifting away from reality. But here is the key detail. If they trust it, if they feel the consistency, if they know the power will be there when they need it, then everything changes. They stop holding back. They stop managing. They start pushing again. And when that happens, Ferrari is no longer compensating for a weakness. They are exploiting a system. But this is where everything builds towards something bigger. Because if this works, it forces every other team to rethink their approach. Not just copy it, rethink it, Because this is not a component. It is a philosophy, a completely different way of racing. And those changes do not happen overnight. So now the question is no longer simple. It is not just, does Ferrari gain performance? It is something much more important. Have they just changed the rules? Without changing the rules? Because if they have, then what we are about to see next is not just an upgrade. It is the beginning of something nobody else is ready for. Because once you understand what Ferrari is really doing, you start to see the risk, not the advantage, the risk. Because this system only works if everything is perfect. Perfect prediction, perfect timing, perfect execution. And Formula One is never perfect. Because races change. Constantly. A safety car appears. A driver defends harder than expected. Tire degradation shifts. Track temperature drops. And suddenly, the prediction is wrong. Not by much, but enough. And in a system like this, small errors become big consequences. Because if Ferrari saves energy for a moment that never comes, they lose performance. If they deploy too early, they run out when it matters most. And that is the danger of controlling everything. You also carry all the responsibility. But this is where the story becomes even more interesting. Because Ferrari knows this. They are not trying to eliminate uncertainty. They are trying to manage it better than anyone else. Which means this system is not fixed. Is constantly adapting, updating, learning, every lap, every sector, every change in conditions. And that creates something no other team fully has yet. A system that evolves during the race, not just before it. But here is the key detail. That evolution depends on data, massive amounts of it, real-time feedback, driver input, sensor readings, energy flow, all feeding into a model that is constantly recalculating the optimal strategy. And that is where Ferrari's real advantage might be hiding. Not in the idea itself, but in how quickly they can refine it. Because the faster you adapt, the less your mistakes cost you, and the more consistent the system becomes. But this is where the tension reaches another level. Because while Ferrari is building something incredibly advanced, they are also making the car more complex, harder to understand, harder to feel, harder to trust. And in Formula One, trust is everything. If a driver does not trust the car, he will never push to the limit. And if he never pushes, the system loses its purpose. So now everything depends on one thing: confidence. Do Hamilton and Leclerc believe in it? Do they feel the consistency? Do they trust that when they need the power, it will be there? Because if the answer is yes, then this system becomes a weapon. But if the answer is even slightly no, then it becomes a limitation. Another layer between driver and performance. But this is where everything connects to the bigger picture. Because what Ferrari is doing right now is not just solving a problem. It is redefining how performance is delivered. Not constant, not maximum, but precise, targeted, controlled. And that is a completely different philosophy. Because Formula One has always been about extracting everything, all the time. But Ferrari is choosing something else. Extracting everything, at the right time. And that difference is what could change everything, but also creates one final question. Because if this works, if Ferrari can truly control when they are fast, then what happens next? Do other teams follow? Do they try to copy it? Do they abandon their current approach? Or do they double down on raw performance? Because this is where the real battle begins. Not just on track, but in philosophy. Between two ways of winning. More power, or better control. And the answer to that question will define not just this season, but the future of Formula One itself. Because if Ferrari is right, then this is not just an upgrade. It is the beginning of a new era, where being the fastest is no longer enough. And the real advantage is knowing exactly when to be fast. And this is where everything finally comes together. Because at some point this stops being about theory, stops being about potential, stops being about what Ferrari could do, and becomes about what they actually do when it matters. On track, under pressure, against rivals who are not waiting. Because Mercedes is not standing still. They still have more raw power, more efficiency, a system that is simpler but brutally effective. And that creates a direct contrast. Ferrari, precise, calculated, predictive. Mercedes, consistent, powerful, relentless. Two completely different philosophies, heading toward the same moment. But here is where the real turning point appears. Because if Ferrari's system works the way they expect, then something unusual happens. They stop racing the whole lap and start racing specific moments. The exit of the final corner, the middle of the straight, the exact second where an overtake becomes possible. And if they win those moments, they win the race, even without being the fastest overall. But this is where the risk reaches its highest level. Because when you build everything around key moments, you cannot afford to miss them. Not once. If the system miscalculates, if the energy is not there at that exact point, the opportunity is gone. And in Formula One, you do not get many of those. But this is where drivers like Hamilton change the equation, because he understands timing better than almost anyone. He knows when to wait, when to pressure, when to strike. And if the car finally gives him the tools, at the exact moment he chooses, then this combination becomes something very difficult to stop. Not because it is the fastest, but because it is the smartest. But here is the final layer, the one everything has been building toward. Because if Ferrari proves this works, then the entire grid has a problem. Not a technical one, a conceptual one. Because how do you respond to something you cannot copy quickly? You cannot just redesign your engine mid-season. You cannot rewrite your entire energy philosophy overnight. And that creates a window, a small one, but enough, where Ferrari operates differently from everyone else. And in that window, they can gain everything. Wins, momentum, control of the narrative. But if they fail, if the system is inconsistent, if the drivers do not fully trust it, then that same complexity becomes a weakness. Too many variables, too many unknowns, too many moments where things do not align. And suddenly, what was supposed to be their advantage becomes the reason they fall behind. Which brings everything to one final question. Not whether Ferrari is faster, not whether the upgrade works, but something much deeper. When the decisive moment arrives, when everything depends on one straight, one corner, one decision, will Ferrari have the power exactly when they need it? Or will they realize they built a system that was almost perfect, but not perfect enough?